You know what I'm saying? They block me out. The Jewish media block me out.
We sort of believe in this idea that this is actually something that is sort of a pathology, if you want to use metaphor, pathology of the soul for human beings. This is a thing that every group of people, every person has to battle with. The things that he's saying aren't taken as the threat that they are. And we've talked about cults on this channel before, the way in which high control groups will manipulate their way into individuals of power or people they think that are in a weak state. A vulnerable and now isolated man who suffers from mental illness has been targeted by groups for quite some time. I mean, like, think about it. Anyone that actually could have talked sense into Kanye West probably has been slowly cut off. The bipolar's not the thing that's leading him there. That's just the way in which these people got to him. Hey everyone. So, some stuff happened. And you probably won't know this because this has been going on online for a while, but Kanye West has been in trouble for a bit because he has been super anti-Semitic online. The short version is it looks like Kanye West is part of a very right-leaning and I would argue very ill group of individuals who are sort of essentially a cult. They are basically people who believe that, you know, African Americans, black people, are the true Israelites, the true Jews, and the current Jews are usurpers. If you want a good explanation of this, I would highly recommend Vosh's videos on Kanye, because they are going to be way more specific about that particular aspect of it. What I wanted to talk about more so today, and Zena kind of agreed with this, is that we have to really thread a needle here, so bear with me. I'm concerned that the narrative around Kanye is really problematic, and specifically because there are ways that I think he is infantilized because of his mental illness, which means the things that he's saying aren't taken as the threat that they are. It's very easy for the media to have a narrative of this white guy is a Nazi. Right? That's the imagery where we sort of run with. But when a person of color starts spreading Nazi propaganda, right? Like that the Jews aren't the real Jews, that kind of weird shit. That's, yeah. That's not just because of mental illness. That's because this person has been groomed into a right-leaning cult. Unironically, I think that we need to change some of the narrative around Kanye, and I think we need to take him for the threat that he is. Kanye West is one of the most well-known hip-hop artists in the fucking world. The organizations that he is touting the information from, these right-leaning organizations that believe that African Americans are the true Jews and, are basically spreading anti-Semitic, basically the equivalent of black version of alt-right propaganda. These organizations seem to actually kind of try to infiltrate celebrities, much the same way Scientology does. And we've talked about cults on this channel before, the way in which high control groups will manipulate their way into individuals of power or people they think that are in a weak state. Kanye West is a great example of that because he is a mentally ill person. He deals with what has been stated is bipolar, though I have questions about that. And this is the needle that we have to thread. I was watching Vosh's stream and he made a comment, him being ableist and all, saying that Kanye's schizo, right? This is some of these delusions, some of these things that he's saying don't sound just like the hallucinations can come up with extreme bipolar. They sound like other stuff. And despite Vosh's very ongoing ableism, I don't think he's wrong. So again, how to say this in a way that doesn't implicate or create a problem? I want to be really clear up front. I cannot diagnose people at distance. I'm not going to tell you what a celebrity has this particular diagnoses or that they have this particular, criteria for this thing. I'm not going to say that I know exactly what is going on inside Kanye West's head. I can't know. But based on the things that I've seen and the delusional way he's talking, Base Jedi in YouTube chat, I agree with you. I'm not saying that being schizophrenic makes you anti-Semitic. Calm down. What I'm saying is that what it reminds me of is when I worked in case management. So before I finished my degree, I worked in case management. I worked as a case manager for AFC and SIL homes. So AFCs are adult foster care facilities, and SILs are semi-independent living facilities. One of the people that I had to deal with a lot were obviously people with bipolar, but some of the people I dealt with schizoaffective disorder. Schizoaffective disorder in the shorthand is essentially what happens if a lot of the effects of schizophrenia fusion with bipolar 1. The most notable client I remember from this was a person who had been severely abused as a child and was very big into self-harm. And this person would have these types of delusions of grandeur. I remember another individual who literally told me they were talking to God in front of me, like at the moment. And so when I hear Kanye West talk about this, I can't say that that's what's going on. I don't want to say that there's a diagnosis here. What I'm saying is it reminds me a lot of those people. I'm reminded of the fact that there seems to be other stuff going on here that I don't think we're really taking into account. Social psych explainer, bipolar 1 is hypermanic, hyperdepressive. So it's basically a sync wave that's equal, right? So it's basically you got your up, you got your down, you got your up, you got your down, and it basically stays relatively solid, though the depressive line can go up. So you're right, it can become hypodepressive in some cases. Bipolar 2 is when you have hypomania, so it never goes into full-blown mania, but you have the full-blown depression, right? So that sync wave is more like little up, big down, little up, big down. One of the things that is a big issue is that people who are often diagnosed with bipolar sometimes aren't bipolar. One of the issues is bipolar is a very popular diagnosis. A lot of people have it thrown at them because it sort of became the diagnosis du jour. I'm not saying people don't have it, but the issue is that in a lot of cases, what I kind of see happen is people tend to, for lack of a better term, they tend to not understand how to watch for the patterns. And so they often can misdiagnose. So one of the things I've noticed is that I have a bias, obviously, for borderline. It's my major knowledge. It's the thing I've studied the most. But I often find that there are people who have, a diagnosis of bipolar, and I don't think it's bipolar. In some cases, this happened a few times, where the bipolar turned out to be borderline, where the sync wave was so fucking erratic and happened so frequently. Because with bipolar, you're talking days, weeks, months. With borderline, you're talking hours in some cases.
Well, the other one I noticed too is PMDD, premenstrual dysphoria disorder, can very easily be both misdiagnosed as bipolar and BPD. Again, because people aren't always watching for the patterns or watching for how the time frames are relating. Premenstrual dysphoria specifically is around the menstrual cycle and is is literally on a schedule. That's the whole point of it. That's the issue with it. But if you're not aware of what that schedule is, or how that's connecting with the menstrual cycle of some kind, anyone, varieties of genders could be dealing with menstrual cycles, okay? Then it gets easy to be diagnosed as something else. Right? We went off on a little bit of a tangent.
Well, but here's the thing is the reason why we're talking about this is that can you see how easy it is to genuine question from a layperson? This is exactly where I was going. Thank you, Dreamer Crystallis. Mm-hmm. How fuzzy are the lines between all those diagnoses? Sometimes very fuzzy, because the problem is that diagnosis. Okay, let's do this as a tangent, but I want to make it clear. Diagnoses are not like objects in the world, right? Mm-hmm. They're not like a fucking cup. They're not like a fucking thing of yarn. They are constructs. They are social constructs based on an aggregate of symptoms that we found have a genuine similarity and connection, right? And so when we do psychometric testing, when we do testing to see if somebody has that disorder, what we're doing is trying to look at various types of validity, right? Is the test valid in the sense that its metrics are doing well? Or are we talking about construct validity, where we're talking about how well does it measure that construct? Because the test could work great, but it might not be actually measuring the thing we're trying to measure.
I could give another example, too, of how some of the lines are fuzzy.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can also be dealing with multiple things or multiple issues, or sometimes things present differently. Like, you could be dealing with both PMDD and borderline, right? PMDD being, this is something that deals with hormonal, how your body reacts to hormones. And so also PMDD can get messy because in dealing with that, you could also be dealing with depression or anxiety because of the symptoms that you are having during the PMDD time. Does that mean that you're in the really rough phase of PMDD constantly? No. But now you are also dealing with more anxiety and depression because you have to deal with that every month. And so I noticed that some of those turn into almost like chicken and the egg, like which thing do you treat? Oh
yeah, that's like a thing that's really difficult. Like there are right? Like, you know, you have let's say you have a kid who, and I've seen this happen before. You have a kid who is, dealing with what looks to be, a mood disorder and quite possibly severe depression, and then also has an eating disorder. What do you treat first? Because you can't really treat all of them simultaneously. That gets messy real quick. So you have to figure out what the best way to do that is. In that case, I would probably treat first the eating disorder because it's the biggest danger to the situation.
Yeah.
But it is a mess. It is a thing to figure out. And so I think that in a lot of ways, what I kind of want to make clear here is that we're not trying to diagnose Kanye. We're not trying to say that he is by any means exempt from judgment because of his mental illness. What I'm saying is that I think the narrative around him has softened the blow on what it is because I think because of his race and because of the tendency for the media to not have a clean narrative on alt-right or right-leaning anti-Semitic hate groups, right?
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, and especially with the media, the perspective that Jess and I come from especially is that a lot of times we see that the media and a lot of lay people don't always have a good way to frame things or understand things when there's a lot of mental illness involved. And that's a particular thing that we come at things from our background that we notice too. Right? Anytime we start getting this in there, it's how do we talk about this? How do we frame it? How do we think about this when we know that this element is in the situation, right? Where do the judgments, or the criticisms, what's an effective way to actually have those while still recognizing there's mental illness going on?
Now, I think everybody's seen the tweets that initially started this off, and then followed by that the Tucker Carlson interview, according with the additional information. We're talking about a man who's going off into incoherent babbling, essentially. Just incoherent, non-connective, non-associative things. And look what the result is. Just look at this for a moment and just tell me, is this a concern?
I watched the George Floyd documentary that Candace Owens put up. One of the things that his two roommates said was, they want a tall guy like me. They want a tall guy like me. And the day when he died, he said a prayer for, 8 minutes. Mm-hmm. He said a prayer for 8 minutes. They hit him with the fentanyl. If you look, the guy's knee wasn't even on his neck like that. When he said mama is his girlfriend. They said he screamed for his mama. Mama was his girlfriend. It's in the documentary. But something that hit me, that fucked me up when I was watching the documentary, and it said, they want a tall guy like me. When I looked at that image of him, this tall black dude with the bald head, he reminded me of somebody else. Who you think he reminded me of?
Virgil.
He reminded me of Virgil. You know what I'm saying? I'm not finna cry in front of y'all because that's how they get me, right? But I know that we lost him. And I know that this white company, Louis Vuitton, is now making statues of him, as a martyr. And we don't know why exactly. We say it's cancer.
But I want to be careful with this subject because.
Wait a second, but tell me, could you even really run this interview? Because Mav didn't run my interview.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They blocked me out. the Jewish media blocked me out.
That's who they is.
Lit, right? I'm lit, right? I'm lit. I'm lit. You know what I'm saying? JP Morgan, I put $140 million into JP Morgan and they treated me like shit. So if JP Morgan Chase is treating me like that, how they treating the rest of y'all?
That's outrageous, yeah.
And this murderers with Chase accounts.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. I am outraged. By the time people they want to calm it down.
Because no matter what, you didn't break no law.
I didn't break a law.
No matter
I didn't break a law.
The bank shouldn't be a judge or jury on anything that's going on. But this
is it's like a social contract. Candace Owens has a word for it, I'm forgetting it. But it's basically like they told Candace Owens she couldn't hang out with me. You know,
So this is what I mean by incoherent babbling. This is the stuff you see with very, very severe mental illness. You know, when I would go to like the day facilities where people would go and hang out, like you'd see people who would do this kind of stuff because they have dealt with severe mental illness their whole life. Again, this isn't making light of that. That is not like trying to make this in any way somehow a joke, because it's not. It's terrifying to be in and deal with those types of situations. It's also incredibly tragic and sad because the reason why it's so scary is because you know that it could happen to you, not because those people are scary in themselves. 9 times out of 10, they're not violent. But it's scary because mental illness is something we all deal with at varying levels. And so the problem is that like, this is what I mean. This is a man who's clearly delusional and no one will actually challenge. He didn't just like dog whistle. I honestly think Kanye is too fucking direct to ever dog whistle. Like he could have stayed with they and never said the Jewish media. And not only did he go to Jewish media, then he started talking about JP Morgan Chase.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Let's see what this one's about.
So then we made the White Lives Matter tees, and then when I put up the tweet, the DEF CON tweet, now he ain't releasing the tee because he's Jewish. And I'm like, see, this is my exact point that I'm making. Like Jewish people have owned the black voice, whether it's through us wearing a Ralph Lauren shirt, or it's all of us being signed to a record label, or having a Jewish manager, or being signed to a Jewish basketball team, or doing a movie on a Jewish platform like Disney. And we understand it's like, I respect what the Jewish people have done and how they brought their people together. So then we made the white...
Yeah, Ye is surrounded by yes men. Correct, dog ear flopper. Absolutely. But look at the level of delusion here. Like, if this was just him going through a manic episode, it would end, but we don't see it ever end. We see it get worse and better, but we never see it really end. And part of that's because he's not on medication. He apparently refuses, from what I've heard from rumor. But like, if anyone else got more clips from this they can find on Twitter, send them to me, please. Or put them in chat. Cause we gotta be really super clear here. Like, this is yeah, Disney wasn't even Jewish. Like, what are we talking about? Well, and that's the problem, is that these, I forget the name of the groups, but the ones that are, you know, these, we're the true Jews, we're the true, 12 tribes of Israel. The people we call Jews are actually usurpers. These groups believe this stuff. They believe in the Jewish question. They believe in Nazi propaganda. Hotep's one example. Yeah, Black Israelites. That's the name. Thank you. Though Hotep is a good example of a good example from what I understand of like the individuals. Let's be super clear. Like, there was dog whistling in that one video. What was that movie that Adam from Your Movie Sucks and Dylan Burns watched? Oh, it was buck breaking, and there was dog whistling in that, and there were people there who were Black Israelites. And this is a radical group of hard right individuals. This is a very small group within the Black community. But the thing is that they get in some ways ignored and essentially, for lack of a better term, basically kind of looked over because they're not part of the majority group. They're not part of the power group. But the problem is that they believe the same things. And this comes to a larger question. If anyone's got any links, please send them, because those are the only two I could find at the moment. Because I would like to watch a few more of those clips. But to kind of make my point. So if you're on Twitter, find those for me, please.
Or for us, yeah.
Yes, for us. Excuse me. I said me because I was asking. Sorry, my bad.
Yeah.
I mean, the Black Hammer types are inherently, like, one of the dudes there is like a direct Black Israelite. So, like, yes. I don't think they've met, but, like, you know, I mean, for all I know, they could have. I don't know. Whatever. Point being is that, like, we've talked about it on the stream before, and Zena and I are in agreement on this notion, and that is that I believe, and so does Zena, that authoritarian tendencies and fascistic tendencies are by definition parts of mental illness. That is not to say that every mentally ill person is a fucking fascist. Far from it. But what it's to say is that if a person believes they're talking to God, we start, you know, questioning that. But when a person starts throwing out this kind of stuff, we don't take it for what it is. It's somebody clearly not well. Like, to me, to believe the things, the level of incoherency and level of, like, fallacy and mental degradation that it takes to be fascistic and authoritarian is a type of mental illness. And to me, and I know this is true for Zena as well, is that we sort of believe in this idea that this is actually something that is sort of a pathology, if you want to use metaphor, pathology of the soul for human beings. This is a thing that every group of people, every person has to battle with. The tendency for wanting control, the tendency for wanting to manipulate, the tendency to want to use whatever means necessary to get an objective done. Some of us resist those urges quite well. Some of us don't. Some of us are groomed into that level of thinking from childhood. Some of us are grabbed later in life when dealing with very real severe mental illness. And that mental illness is pushed to a further level. I would almost say to some degree, if I had like a gun to my head, I would actually say that there's, you know, someone who was behaving like Kanye probably has two coexisting things. The tendency and leniency towards authoritarian fascism and the diagnosis that he has as of right now, which is bipolar. The bipolar's not the thing that's leading him there. That's just the way in which these people got to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I do want to stress that, like, the bipolar is not the part that is responsible.
Nor is an excuse, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Sociopathy or psychopathy, I would say that, like, those terms aren't really useful to me because the problem is sociopathy gets into, like, some weird, like, ableism with antisocial personality disorder, and psychopathy is like a specific term of a thing happening. It's a state. When the Elliot Rodgers thing happened, I actually found myself cringing at feminists who wanted to reduce it to the whole Rodgers problem just to misogyny, because not every misogynist goes to commit murders. Yeah. Because his issue wasn't just misogyny; he was part of a hate group that swallowed the black pill. We have people in chat who have bipolar 1 and 2. People who are in the YouTube chat who have said they have, schizophrenia. None of these people are Black Israelites. None of them are Nazis. None of them are super geeked about the idea of, fucking over the Jews. Like, can we be really honest about this? Like, it's not the mental illness. It's the fact that the mental illness is the gateway. It's the inroad. Mental illness is the way these groups get you.
Well, and I would also add in, to anyone that wants to particularly just stigmatize bipolar, come on now. People with, depression or, anxiety. That can also act as a way for, various cult-like groups to kind of have an inroad to somebody, especially when they're offering kind of like the thing to fix everything. And it's not, and at least from when I see kind of with lay people or people who aren't like famous, like it's not that, what was I going to say? Sorry, my brain flopped. All right, cult. It's sometimes like can be really mundane things of like, hey, we have a group of people here, like a preset friend group. It's not always like extreme stuff either. It's not like there's something like, big massive flags or anything. So that's all.
Yeah. And again, like these are the inroads. So like, again, like some of this stuff going on, I'm trying to find some good examples. Like Does anyone, first off, this is shared by Laverne Spicer, so let's be very clear.
And I don't want to say that it's just mental illness that makes you vulnerable either. When we've had like Beyond Safe Words on, thinking that, like, the thing is that everybody can find themselves in these situations too. You know, it is somewhat difficult for everybody to figure out, you know, that a situation is crappy until there's enough built up things that have happened to prove to you that it's that crappy. So I don't want to be in the other side of the fallacies either to kind of deal with this stuff. I think I've been noticing a lot of really large blanket statements throughout our chat during this, or overarching statements.
Yeah, we want to be really careful. We want to be very, very careful about blanket statements and the tendency to make generalizations in these situations, because we want to be very specific about our arguments, because it's very easy to go down to a road where we start to justify things or make things be in a particular way. So I strongly urge people to be as nuanced as possible. When I say that these are fascistic tendencies, I can point to the specific tendencies by echo that these make sense of, or why this looks authoritarian, right? I can compare it to what I know about psychologically about authoritarianism, as well as like authoritarian parenting. Here's another thing.
I'm talking about put out my White Lives Matter tee. The White Lives Matter tee don't say nothing. It don't say DEF CON or nothing on it, right? I'm like, put it out. And he's telling me like, yo, I want you to visit the Holocaust Museum. And I was like, yo, I want you to visit Planned Parenthood. That's our Holocaust Museum.
So one of the big talking points that's gone on here is the idea that Planned Parenthood is actually like run by, you know, was created by this eugenicist, which was true, except for everybody in like the 30s or 40s was also a eugenicist. So I'm not really sure what that means. The other thing is that like,
we're almost 100 years after that. No, there's a lot of stuff different.
Well, and also the fact is that this brings up, you absolutely fucking correct, Zena. But the other thing is I'll bring up is that this is also very telling, because the reason why the disproportionate number of abortions are done with Black women is because of socioeconomic factors, because a disproportionate number of Black women are poor. That's why that happens, because a lot of Black women have to get abortions in order to continue with whatever their goals are or things that happen. Like, this is not rocket science, but they believe it's this conspiracy to, you know, weed out weed out Black people. It's bizarre. Also, I saw this meme and I had to laugh. Mentally damaged Black men being exploited by the GOP. Kanye West, Herschel Walker.
Goddamn.
Fair.
And the thing too that I noticed with some of this is that weird comparison, or putting like Planned Parenthood versus like the Holocaust Museum. Like, you can have, like, they're not like opposing forces. Like, that doesn't make any sense here. So yeah, these are very much things that, like, no, you can learn about both of these topics, both of these issues, and hold on to both of these. School kids do that. They do. Like, that's what we teach kids in school. We teach them about, you know, various topics with feminism and hopefully, you know, better stuff with sex education, but also they learn about various parts of history, including the Holocaust. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'll be honest, like, I'm looking through here, we're seeing a lot of the same stuff, but like what it breaks down to is like a vulnerable and now isolated man has been, who suffers from mental illness, has been targeted by groups for quite some time. I mean, like, think about it. Yeah, his wife left him and she had every fucking right to do so. But think about what that did. I mean, that basically continued to isolate him. Anyone that actually could have talked sense into Kanye West probably has been slowly cut off, either by his ideology, by his behavior. In a lot of ways, like, it really does sort of stand out to me that, like, how bad this stuff has gotten. How terrible this narrative has gotten, that, like, oh, just, you know, Kanye West is crazy. Like, he might have dealt with mental illness for quite some time, but he was driven to this current iteration through incredibly toxic ideologies. And I guess I just want to bring up, and this is something me and Zena talked about, which is that whether it is bipolar or something else, we need to look at that as a series of symptoms that are being utilized and manipulated because someone like Kanye West has a lot of clout and a lot of power. And the thing is that there are people who would want to utilize that, much in the same way Scientology does it. Yeah, he absolutely needs a good therapist and a psychiatrist who won't take his shit. Is this situation analogous to Christianity? No, because I would say that this is more of the folly of fame. Christian's a little bit different. Christian was targeted by a group of online harassers, right?
Yeah, I think it's especially hard to make should statements, which coming back to that, some of what I've been seeing in chat, is there seems to be a lot of should statements based on making claims about fame and mental illness. And the thing is that it's hard to make a should statement based on a single case. Right? You are taking very complicated situations and situations that are probably unique in and of themselves and making a large scale claim. And that also kind of leads us in the wrong direction as well, I think. Because I think that almost detracts us from looking at how these groups are utilizing, Kanye's, how he is right now. It's not really like getting down to the roots of the issue. Like fame isn't necessarily the problem here. It's not just that mental illness is the problem. It's all of the things going around utilizing those parts, utilizing those elements.
And I mean, there's some really great articles coming out right now. There's one by Forward.com that is the real Kanye West scandal, talking about like that Tucker Carlson, Kanye West interview that was just absolutely like, can we be honest that it was just mumbling at one point? Not to mention, like, there's a video here of apparently him calling Puff Daddy a Fed. Again, Fed posting, hooray. And then another article by HuffPost that basically says, people with bipolar disorder are sick of fans making excuses for Kanye. Absolutely. As someone that supports decreasing the stigma of mental illness, I actually think that Kanye is doing an incredibly negative effect here. Because the fact is that essentially by infantilizing a grown-ass man who is clearly dealing with very severe mental illness and is being essentially like recruited by an insane cult, by definition, this spreads the idea that people with mental illness are going to act like him. Like, there's people in chat that have actually, because I've talked about this, and Zena as well, have gone like, hey, I have schizophrenia and I'm not anti-Semitic. Of course you're not. Those two things have nothing to do with each other.
Right.
How could you even assume that I would make that connection? That makes no sense. But the mental illness is the lead-in for the conspiratorial thinking. That the Jews are out to get him. That he's been silenced by these people. When in reality, he's a sad guy who has way too much money, too many yes men, and basically lost his family because of his behavior. I don't know what happened between him and Kim. I have no idea. But clearly something wasn't okay. I guess the overall thrust here is that I want to really be careful with the mental illness stuff here because, again, I'm not trying to diagnose. Me and Zena aren't trying to say that this is in any way representative of mental illness. What we're trying to sort of say is that this is why... Well, I guess on the larger scale, the prescriptive statement I would make is, and I think Zena would agree with this, is that we need reform to make mental health more accessible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we've talked about that quite a bit.
And we also need to talk about more about ethics codes in regards to how they deal with people who are rich, because I can see the incentivization of someone paying you thousands of dollars per hour, you not wanting to kind of challenge them for fear they'll leave. Right? There's some point, like, I get money through insurance companies, which is dirty and I hate it, but it's fine. The fact of the matter is that, like, that's just the system. I can't really do much about it at this point. But the thing is, I get paid, whatever amount per whatever that insurance pays out, at about 50% of that, the other part goes to the place I work. But the reality is like, if someone's coming in and paying cash of several $1,000s, I can imagine there are therapists who would have a very strong incentive to not piss that client off because they don't want them to go. So there's a question on reform and a willingness to in some ways, make sure the code of ethics is up to standards. Also, Psych Explainer says, also normalize men going to therapy. Absolutely. Back when I identified as a guy, or at least was pretending to be a guy. The reality is that like myself and actually Wednesday, who's been on the show, he and I were actually the only people there that were male-bodied at the time, because a lot of the people that were doing therapy were women.
Well, yeah, and I've certainly dealt with like a lot of those social pressures, with how women get pushed into, you know, helping professions, but men don't, right? And dealt with the reverse of that too.
Yeah.
Did I have a thing? Sorry, my brain's a little slow today. Let's see if it comes back to me. It was something about changing the system quite a bit. Making sure that therapy is accessible both to the therapist, that there isn't undue risk on the therapist either. I think there's been cases where
creating,
if you get your name leaked and you are working with that client, you could also be targeted, you know, or having to worry about more with like, you know, internet security or computer security kind of thing, to keep records confidential and make sure that you're not also targeted in that process, or that there's protections for you. I think both of those issues really do kind of need to be looked at.
No, I would agree. I would agree. And I would say that like support for families. I would also say that like, you know, we can talk about mental health reforms more later, but I think that there's a lot of changes here that need to happen. A lot of normalization, a lot of destigmatizing. My list can go on and on forever.
Absolutely.
There are like, I just genuinely think that all therapists should be forced to go to therapy for a number of hours per year. I also think that every therapist should have to do trainings on marginalized groups, one group per year at the least. And I think it should genuinely start with like LGBT folks, because the honest thing is one, that's a huge swath of people. And two, the reality is that every time I've been to a training, that is the one group no one knows shit about.
Yep. And they exist in every group.
No, men need to be encouraged to do care. Like full fucking stop. Men need to be encouraged to do care. Absolutely true, Oxide Lounge. But with that said, I think that covers Kanye, at least for now. The anti-Semitism is fucking cringe. We denounce it. And again, this is what happens when grifters and alt-righters get a hold of somebody who is not in touch with reality. And we need to be careful of that. And this is why mental health is so important. So with that said, we'll see you in the next segment. All right, out of here. If you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. Also, consider donating to us. You can support us on our website, transgirltherapist.org. You can also help us on our Patreon, link below, or you can become a member here on YouTube. Thank you so much for watching.